Yes.
Have you ever looked back at an experience from your childhood and wondered, what on earth was I doing? What was I thinking? I know I have. As an arrogant boy at the age of 9 years old, I was always energetic and eager to explore the unknown. However, I lacked caution against arrogance and the overestimation of one's abilities that comes with it. This usually got me into trouble and resulted in the anger of my parents and the subsequent beatings that followed. I always felt restricted living in a polished Floridian suburb and took any chance I could to find adventure. I would explore the swamps, hunt, trap, and fish when I could. I never engaged in any behavior that was malicious by nature, but merely activities that could be described as adventurous. My taste for adventure, however, was far more than my parents could stomach, and I was constantly under the pressure from their reprimands. One could say that perhaps they were too controlling, but by all means, I was reckless in the spirit of my own invincibility. Whatever the case, the combination of my curiosity and the constant control would lead to me constantly desiring to break out. I would see my chance to do this during one of our family trips to my grandparents' house in North Carolina for the summer. They owned a substantial bit of property in Greensboro and in Southern Virginia. When we visited them, we would always drive up to the country in Southern Virginia where there was no Wi-Fi or cell service. The area was isolated and the embodiment of the landscape that it had been for thousands of years. They owned so much of the land in the area and several small houses that my ancestors had lived in and owned for the last 200 years, primarily under the occupation as tobacco farmers. It was a place of history with great fields surrounded by dense forests. I'd always enjoyed being there, but this time I was determined to do more than just admire the surrounding landscape. I had devised a plan. I don't know why, but at the time, I wondered how deep the surrounding forests really were. So I made up my mind that I was going to find out. I knew my parents would never allow a 9-year-old to engage in such an endeavor, but I knew that they would be preoccupied in the pleasantries of a family reunion that was taking place with over 100 of our relatives. So I made up my mind that during the confusion, I would leave early in the morning. Hopefully, no one would notice my departure and just assume that I was with another group, perhaps at another house. I figured that before anyone noticed, I would be back and happier as a result of my experience. So at 6 in the morning, I began my journey. I started straight for the woods by the road. In truth, I was unsure really where I was going or what I hoped to accomplish from my actions. Initially, I had little trouble, and for an hour, I made decent progress throughout the terrain. However, the area began to become more dense and wild. I found that I could no longer maintain as linear a path as I would have liked, but I still felt relatively good and a good understanding of my surroundings. However, this feeling began to succeed as I began to wonder which way had I come from. I began to develop an irritating itch from the surrounding vegetation, and as a whole, I was becoming more frustrated and weary. My ambition to explore had begun to dissipate, and I decided to retrace my steps and look for another way. But as I attempted to do this, I realized I didn't know which way I had come from. Upon realizing that I was lost, I decided it would be best for me to just walk in the direction I best thought I had come from. However, the terrain was completely unfamiliar to me. Hours had passed. In my abundant wisdom, I didn't think to supply myself with anything rather than some water and a pocket knife. I was beginning to feel hopeless and alone. All I wanted now was to get back safely. I had badly cut my knee and was completely covered in dirt. My own beliefs of immortality had been directly challenged here, and I was completely powerless and unable to help myself. But then, by then it was well past midday, and it was branching into the evening. But I wouldn't give up, and I kept searching. I felt that as I was beginning to get back on track. However, it soon began to get dark. The mosquitoes were merciless, and at this point, I had been bitten by several dozen other creatures. As the night descended, so did my hopes for salvation. All I wanted to do was get back home. Completely unconcerned with the prospect of any punishments that may have been imposed on me upon my arrival, that I would in fact have welcomed if it meant I could get out of this godforsaken forest. I would realize that with the darkness would come no chance of successfully navigating my way throughout the rest of the night. I knew that there were several types of animals, such as bears and coyotes. So I decided it would be best to wait out the night rather than continue to trudge along through the forest. I positioned myself under a large tree and wait for day. And upon the next day, I would be able to find my way back by identifying a mountain that would eventually lead me back to a road, which would take me back to the other houses. So I would later find out that no one had, everyone else had actually gone camping. And when I went to the house, no one was actually there, and then they all came back and thought I had stayed behind. And so they said, well, why'd you just stay in the house? You could have been enjoying the country. But in fact, I had been getting my fill. But while it seems like a rather small and insignificant incident now at the time, I seriously reflected upon this experience. It would lead me as a whole to abide with a greater degree of caution and respect for my surroundings. The main lesson I would take away from this experience is one of caution against the arrogance and the overestimation of one's ability that comes with it. Thank you.
Okay.